The third season of the 2012 series of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles introduced many horror-inspired monsters into the mythos. The Creep was the first of these monsters to be introduced. But interestingly, it was because of the unavailability of another classic character that this character had to be created. So who's the Creep, and why did we never get an action figure of him? Join me today and find out. The Creep was created for Within the Woods, an episode written by one of his creators, Brandon Auman. It took place after the events of the Krang invasion of New York. The Turtles, April and Casey, were forced to escape the city after the apparent death of their master, carrying a badly hurt Leonardo. With no other place to go, they spent 3 months in April's family farmhouse in Northampton, waiting for Leonardo to heal from his wounds. Leo eventually woke up. His wounds were so bad and his condition so weak that even his voice changed. To accelerate his healing, Donatello manufactured some mutagenic medicine for him. Raphael tried to help Leo train and regain his strength, but he was still too weak, and the mutagenic medicine only made him more nauseous. After throwing up, Raph walked him back to the house. What neither of them realized was that Leo's weakness had already set something terrible in motion. That night, their TV time was cut short by a blown fuse, followed quickly by a dead flashlight in an extinguished fireplace. As Donatello worked on bringing back the light, Raphael went outside to chop some wood for the fireplace. After a few hours, the rest of the group realized that he had been missing for too long, so they went out to look for him. Seeing how they needed to cover a lot of ground through the woods, Leo decided to split them into 2 groups. Mikey and Donnie went inside an isolated shed to investigate, and in there, they found what looked like a shrine to Donatello's medicine and a horrifying creature. It didn't take them long to realize that the horrifying creature was a mutated Raphael. Still not recovering from the horror of seeing their brother in this shape, the two were captured by a swamp creature. The Creep then attacked Casey and April, and after losing the burlap sack he was wearing as a mask, he took Casey's. April started running away from the creature until she reunited with a very weakened Leo. Adding to his frustration, Leo saw April being dragged back into the woods by some unknown force. In that moment, Leo realized the harsh truth. Splitting up had been a deadly mistake. Back in the shed, Mikey, Donnie, Casey, and April watched in shock as the Creep drained the mutagen from Raphael, until all that remained of him was a simple plant. Despite his debilitated state, Leonardo faced the Creep and helped free the other 4 to help him against the creature. After seeing the shrine, Leo realized the medicine was the key to keeping the Creep distracted long enough to chain him to a tree. Donnie then used an IV tube to drain the mutagen out of the Creep and into Raphael, turning him back to normal. All that remained of the Creep was a puddle of swamp goo, which Donatello sealed in a jar for his trophy shelf back at the lair. It seemed inert, but something inside was still alive. One day, Mikey messed up Donnie's trophy shelf, accidentally exposing the swamp goo jar to a serum Donnie was working on that could reverse the mindworm's effects. This substance was efficient in freeing the Creep. After attacking the Turtles, April, and Splinter, the Creep escaped with another trophy, Snakeweed's Claw. Tracking down the Creep proved to be more complicated than expected. Because of Mikey's mess, Donatello had contact with the serum, which started undoing his intellectual capacity.
Squirrel!
The Creep, on the other hand, had gained some intellect, and he used it to grow a son of Snakeweed from the disembodied claw. April attacked the duo of mutants with the Shell Razor, killing them in the resulting explosion. But from their remains was born Creepweed, a giant organism that started taking over the city. After releasing sleeping spores into the air, the creature began capturing people and storing them to feed from later. Taking advantage of his photographic memory, Mikey tried to create an antidote based on what he saw Donnie do while working on the serum. Unfortunately, after Donnie drank the potion, he got even dumber. The Turtles tried to defeat Creepweed without much luck. When everything seemed lost, Donatello showed up with a retro mutagen-based weed killer, which ultimately put an end to the giant creature. It turned out that Mikey's potion, while slow, was effective in bringing Donnie back to normal. Learning from their mistakes, the turtles stored Creepweed's remains inside a hermetically sealed crate. The Creep was created by Ciro Nieli and Brandon Auman, partially out of necessity. You see, the move to Northampton was inspired by the original arc from the Mirage comics, a story that had already been adapted for the live-action movie and the 2003 series. It seemed like the right time to adapt it for the 2012 series, as the Turtles were in the middle of a rebirth arc. They needed to get their convictions together to return to the city as heroes. But bringing the Turtles into the woods was also an excuse to break from the monotony of 2 seasons in the city and get the Turtles in contact with nature. But of course, this meant creating an entirely new location, a costly endeavor for a CGI show. With very little time to pre-design and pre-build, they had to start making all the new assets for the first episode, adding to the world in the following week's chapters. This meant they didn't know what the sets would look like while writing the episodes, which wasn't ideal. For Brandon and Ciro, taking our defeated turtles into the woods meant something else. It was the perfect setting for horror, and a great excuse to channel their love for horror movies. While some fans disliked the horror in the first few episodes of the season, these chapters were released during the month leading up to Halloween, so it ended up making sense at the time. That first episode, Within the Woods, introduced the Creep. The title was actually a nod to Sam Raimi's short film of the same name. Initially, Ciro and Brandon wanted to use Bloodsucker, a character from the River trilogy. But those comics were unfortunately out of reach for Nickelodeon, as Rick Veitch never signed off his rights to the story. Looking for a replacement, they came up with a hybrid between Jason Voorhees, Bloodsucker, and other classic swamp monsters like the original Swamp Thing and Man Thing. This was necessary, as making him plant-based meant no blood to censor, and it helped them achieve that 70s swamp horror creature vibe they were going for. Just like in the River trilogy, the creature absorbed Raphael's mutagen, rendering him defenseless. Similarly, Donatello started losing his intelligence as the Creep gained his, although it was more accidental in the latter case. The Creep never spoke, just like Jason. In fact, he has too many similarities with the fictional serial killer. He started using a burlap sack as his mask, later moving on to a hockey mask, just like Jason did in chapters 2 and 3. And one more tribute was the Voorhees brand emblazoned on his overalls, albeit with just one O. Instead of a common leech sucking Raphael's blood, Ciro and Brandon came up with the idea of a sickly Leonardo birthing a psychotic, mutagen-hungry creature from a combination of vomit and swamp muck. Also, this was Seth Green's first episode as Leonardo, after the unfortunate departure of Jason Biggs, which is a story for another day. Ciro had a special connection with horror films. He used to watch them with his family as a kid, which helped him bond with them. As a result, he was never truly scared of horror films. Because of this experience, he went for a family horror vibe during the first few episodes of the 3rd season. From his point of view, scaring a kid usually resulted in them becoming obsessed with the movie or show. And since this was a family show, the experience wouldn't be scary to kids, because they would have their parents by their side. Nickelodeon was initially fine with the direction, but after a few episodes, it started to feel too much like a horror show, prompting them to ask him to stop with the Monster of the Week episodes. But while this lasted, it left us with a whole arc of family horror episodes. The Creep almost had an action figure that even made it to a final prototype phase. Unfortunately, Playmates deemed the figure too scary for children. They also had a similar problem with the Muckman figure. Also, another story for a future video. There were also rumors that Playmates didn't want to produce the figure due to its size, which would have been considerably out of scale with the rest of the line. This sounds very likely, as Playmates has historically avoided making some figures bigger than others, for many practical reasons. What do you think of the episodes with the Creep? Do you find these episodes too scary for kids? Or do you think the horror was downplayed enough to make them fun? Let me know in the comments. Thanks for watching. See you in the sewers.